In October of 2002, the United States Congress granted President George W. Bush the authority to use military force against Iraq. Bush and his administration's main justification for that request was based on intelligence indicating that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. 4 months later, the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, presented that intelligence to the international community at the United Nations. The next month, the United States, along with Britain, Australia, and Poland, launched Shock and Awe, the start of the invasion of Iraq. Now, as we now know, the intelligence that led to that war was entirely wrong. In 2005, a bipartisan presidential commission concluded that, quote, the intelligence community was dead wrong in almost all of its pre-war judgments about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. This was a major intelligence failure, end quote. A major intelligence failure that got us into an 8-year war. Now, in the case of the current war in Iran, the inverse is true. The intelligence has proven to be correct. President Trump just chose to disregard it. The genesis of this was May 8, 2018, when Trump withdrew the United States from the historic Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that's the JCPOA, which we will know better as the Iran nuclear deal. That decision was made in spite of the intelligence from the United Nations and Trump's own administration certifying that Iran was abiding by the terms of the deal and that the deal was working to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. As a result of that withdrawal and subsequent reinstallation of harsh economic sanctions, Iran started enriching uranium again, past the level needed for civilian use. And by 2023, UN inspectors found that Iran was getting closer to obtaining weapons-grade uranium, which is exactly what the intelligence community said would happen if we pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. And it's been the exact same story with this current war. As Shane Harris writes in The Atlantic, quote, the intelligence community was accurate and consistent in its pre-war judgments about Iran's capabilities and intentions to attack the United States and its allies. Contrary to what President Trump has said to justify his decision, the intelligence showed that the Iranian regime was not preparing to use a nuclear weapon. It did not have ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States, and in response to a U.S. military attack, Iran was likely to strike at neighboring countries in the Persian Gulf and try to close the Strait of Hormuz, precipitating a global economic crisis. All of this was known before the war and presented to President Trump. This was an intelligence success, end quote. This was an intelligence success. The failure lies with President Trump. Harris adds, quote, some of Trump's allies have criticized him for not making a public case for the war, as the Bush administration did. But if he had accurately presented the intelligence, the facts would have argued against attacking Iran. Perhaps that's why the president ignored and later misrepresented what his advisors told him, end quote. One of those advisors, his own National Counterterrorism Center director, Joe Kent, a former Green Beret and a MAGA loyalist, recently resigned over the war, writing on social media that, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, end quote. And it's not just that. Look at one of Trump's stated goals, regime change. About a week before the start of the strikes, a classified report from the U.S. National Intelligence Council warned that the Iranian regime was unlikely to be toppled, even by an extensive assault like the one we saw play out prior to the current ceasefire. That's according to a report in the Washington Post. So unless you count replacing one Ayatollah Khamenei with a younger, more hardline Ayatollah Khamenei as regime change, once again, the intelligence was right. As Harris concludes, quote, 2 decades ago, a president embraced information that turned out to be wrong, and disaster followed. Today, a president disregards assessments that proved to be right, and the predictable comes to pass. There's a failure of intelligence there, too, just not the kind we're used to seeing, end quote. Joining me now to discuss this is John Brennan. He's a former director of the CIA under President Obama. He led the agency from 2013 to 2017. He's also a senior national security advisor and intelligence analyst for MS Now. Director Brennan, thank you for being with us. I just can't get past this point. This is not a failure of intelligence. This administration had information that has played out completely as we're seeing it. How did we get to this?
Well, that's a good question, Ali. As you pointed out, the intelligence community failed in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq, but the intelligence community processes were overhauled, and they learned a lot of very painful lessons as a result. But looking at this war, this very needless war, every intelligence professional who had worked on the region or on nuclear matters or whatever, I think came to the same conclusion. First of all, Iran did not have a nuclear weapon. It was not close to, in fact, developing a nuclear weapon. Yes, it had highly enriched uranium, which was a concern. But in terms of the impact of an air campaign on Iran, I think there was unanimity in terms of this was not going to bring about a regime change. But this is, consistent with Donald Trump's past. He has long been dismissive of intelligence community products. He has long disparaged the intelligence community professionals. I think it's all part of his narcissism and megalomania that he believes he's the most brilliant person in the room, and he goes on his gut instinct as opposed to what the intelligence community and what the facts really are quite evident in terms of what would happen with this disastrous pursuit of this war campaign.
So, Director Brennan, I think it's important for our viewers to understand that this information about what we knew about Iran, some of it's classified, but a lot of it was fully out there. I want to play for you an exchange that took place between Jon Ossoff and the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in Congress before this.
So the assessment of the intelligence community is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by last summer's airstrikes.
Yes.
In the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The White House stated on March 1st of this year that this war was launched and was, quote, a military campaign to eliminate the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, end quote. That's a statement from the White House. Quote, the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
Director Brennan, I want to ask you about that last sentence. So Tulsi Gabbard was pretty clear that Iran didn't pose an imminent nuclear threat. And when asked by Jon Ossoff, she said the only person who can determine what is or isn't an imminent threat is the president. I would have thought the president can decide what he wants to do about it and what the American military will do about it. But is the determination of that not left to our intelligence agencies?
Yes, Tulsi Gabbard's statement was absurd. It is the intelligence community's responsibility, obligation to identify threats to U.S. national security. And certainly in this case, in terms of Iran's nuclear enrichment program, it was the assessment of the U.S. intelligence community for many years that Iran was not able, at this point, be able to fabricate a nuclear warhead and then marry it with some type of delivery system for a weapon. And so their lies are obvious. Their own assessments really undercut their rationale, their explanations, their foolish efforts to try to provide some type of rationale or basis for this war. But clearly, it was the intelligence community's continued assessment that Iran didn't pose an imminent threat. There was no reason, no casus belli in terms of going to war, but they continued to just allow Donald Trump, who has such ignorance of the region and I think tremendous incompetence as well as a failure to understand what the intelligence is providing. He makes the decision single-handedly. And according to the recent reporting that's out there, as they went around the White House Situation Room, nobody was willing to say, Mr. President, this is a bad idea. We should not do this.
So Donald Trump said early in this campaign, he was asked by a reporter that people are getting frustrated by the high price of gas, and he said, "Well, they'll be really happy that someone can't throw a nuclear armed missile at us." I'm paraphrasing here. As you pointed out, there's two parts to this. There has to be a nuclear warhead, and there has to be a delivery system capable of reaching the United States for there to be a threat that Iran could throw, as Donald Trump says, a nuclear armed missile at the United States. Both of those things currently are false. It doesn't mean that Iran wouldn't like to have it or isn't working towards it, but we have determined that that's not actually a thing.
That's right. And Donald Trump's statements were asinine and intentionally, I think, misrepresenting the facts. As we well know, he is just a consistent liar on these issues. And to use these lies as the basis to go to war that led to the devastation of so many people, and look what's happening inside of Iran and Lebanon, U.S. service members being killed, the fact that he's able to do that and members of his party and his MAGA base continue to explain and apologize for him or rationalize what he's doing is just so troubling and worrisome that this person who clearly is unhinged and who I think the 25th Amendment was written with Donald Trump's in mind, because allowing someone like this to continue to be the commander in chief and to control the tremendous capabilities of the U.S. military, including our nuclear weapons capability, which he seemed to allude to when he said he's going to just eliminate an entire civilization. Again, we really are in very, very troubling times. And I'm very glad that, at least according to reporting, Vice President Vance has brought some government professionals and experts with him to these discussions in Islamabad. And so we've gotten rid of the private equity guys and the real estate developers engaged in these negotiations. We need experts to be involved in this.
Yeah, sadly, the private equity guys and the real estate negotiators are in Islamabad. They're hanging out, but let's hope they're not leading the negotiations. Director, good to see you as always. John Brennan, the former director of the CIA and MS Now, senior national security and intelligence analyst. We'll be right back.